more abundant, and competition among suppliers brings their prices down. Now, parenthetically, in our economy, of course, we haven't noticed for a century, we haven't seen prices come down because they're always increasing the money supply. So this process is masked. But we do see it in the 19th century, and we see it today in electronics and computers. Prices consistently come down in those areas over time. We just have come to expect it. And so this is how our living standards increase, is that there is this investment in capital equipment that makes the production process more physically productive, goods more abundant, their prices lower in terms of how many minutes we have to work in order to earn the money to buy them, and then our living standards are improved. I mean, think of how many minutes you would have had to work to earn the money necessary to buy what is today a cell phone in 1970. Imagine what would have been necessary, all the sacrifices that would have been necessary in that society to bring about that technology. It would have been absolutely prohibitive. All the things we would have had to sacrifice in order to apply the resources to cell phone production would have been completely off the charts. But yet we take this entirely for granted, like this is just automatic, like the institutional forms don't matter, these things just occur. So in other words, this is an area in which if we don't understand how this works, then we can shoot ourselves in the foot very easily. And one way to shoot ourselves in the foot, of course, would be to tax this process. Would be to tax people who are engaged in this very process of taking profits and then investing them in capital equipment so as to make possible the rise in our living standards, a rise that occurs not because we steal from one group and give to another, and there's no overall rise, but a spontaneous, voluntary process. That is interrupted every time we tax or sledgehammer or whatever people who are engaged in it. And yet we're all taught from birth that that's what we need to do. These bloodsuckers need to be bashed and taxed and looted and expropriated. But you understand that doing that is just shooting ourselves in the foot. We shouldn't want to do that. This is an area in which we all have the same interests in society. Everybody should want this process to continue unhampered, but yet nobody realizes that, unfortunately, and so we continue to hurt ourselves. All right, so there's my little shtick about the virtues of the market. All right, but now what about this? We did just see this rap video after all, and how can you not say something about that? So I'm going to say a little something about the freaking business cycle because people are very interested in this right now because we're sort of enduring the bust tale of a business cycle. And this is an area in which, man, do we need education. And you think, well, no, economics, not interesting, but as I say, more and more people are getting interested in it the more they give it a chance, the more they read the Austrian School of Economics. But also, when your portfolio gets wiped out, when you really take a beating, suddenly people get interested. And because they want to know what in the world just happened. And, as my friend Lou Rockwell puts it, people are always saying that this or that aspect of economics or the Federal Reserve is just boring and not interesting. And Lou says, no, you know what, I think the fact that I'm getting ripped off is quite interesting. As a matter of fact, I don't find this boring at all. I'm very interested in this. So, all right, so the business cycle thing, we saw a little bit. Now, if you haven't ever read the positions of Keynes and Hayek, it might be a little difficult to follow, but you can't help humming to yourself, blame low interest rates. Like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, I don't know what that means, but it's catchy. That's right. Because you're inclined to think, wait a minute, I like low interest rates. Like, who doesn't like low interest rates? But, of course, we like low everything. We don't like milk prices to be 10 cents a gallon. But if we made milk prices 10 cents a gallon, would that mean that all of us would be able to get 10-cent milk? It would mean that none of us would have any milk. Because no one's going to supply it at 10 cents, and everyone's going to demand it. So it's not enough just to say, well, something's desirable, therefore we should force it into existence. I wish we lived in a comic book world like that, but we don't. We have to be mature adults about this. All right, so when we talk about a business cycle, all we mean is, how come the economy seems to just move in this up and down pattern? Like we're all doing great, and then we're all in the toilet, and then we're doing great, and on and on and on. And this has just happened so much that we're all inclined to think, well, it's just the way, capitalism is. You've got to take the good with the bad. It's good. It gives us a lot of bread, and peanut butter and stuff, but it's bad, and then it just goes up and down. You've got to take the good with the bad. But what Hayek is suggesting is that that's not really the case. That actually it seems like it's an outside force, not within the market itself, that's causing this. Because if we look at the modern period where we start to see what we would recognize as business cycle, it's also the same time that we see the modern banking system come into effect, or perhaps there's some kind of connection between these two things. So what Hayek wants to know is, why is it that all of a sudden, entrepreneurs, whom the market has selected for their ability at forecasting consumer demand, why are they all suddenly so bad at this? Why are they all suddenly, or not, obviously not literally all of them, but why are so many of them in a cluster suddenly making errors? Why are there so many losses concentrated at one time? I mean, well, you can say, well, people aren't buying as much stuff. Well, why didn't they anticipate that? That's their job, is to anticipate that. And so it's to slough off some of their inputs and reduce their output and continue to be profitable. How come they didn't anticipate this? Well, why are they blindsided? It's a good question. And this is what Hayek wins the Nobel Prize for. And I realize, that Nobel Prizes are being given out like candy today. So you're inclined to think, Nobel Prize, Schmobel Prize. But the significance of Hayek's prize, Hayek is one of these economists in this so-called Austrian school. Hayek wins the prize for telling the Nobel Committee the exact opposite of what it wants to hear. So that is significant. When you say exactly what they want to hear, well, okay, you win the prize. But it's significant that Hayek wins it for that reason. Let me just say in parentheses, when I say Austrian School of Economics, I've got to be very clear about this. We're not, I honestly don't mean this as a joke. I do want to clarify this. People are coming to this for the first time. We're not talking about anything having to do with Austria. If Austria were following Austrian economics, it would have higher living standards than it had. Or if it followed the implications of the policy implications of Austrian economics, it would be doing even better than it is. But the school, rather, is a school of thought. It's called the Austrian School because its early theorists came from Austria. So Karl Menger, Eugen von Böhm-Bawerk, both of whom we have T-shirts of, by the way, at the Mises Institute. I have just a Böhm-Bawerk one because my wife has imposed a T-shirt quota on me when it comes to economist shirts. So if I get a new one, I have to send another one to Goodwill. To me, I don't want to make light of people's situation, but it'd be interesting to see some average guy who just needs a T-shirt walking around with Böhm-Bawerk, on, not realize the significance of this. But maybe he'll look him up and it'll be a revolution in his life. I don't know. Anyway, I guess I should donate more shirts, is what I'm thinking of as I stand here. But anyway, so the Austrian school, we identify it with people like in the 20th century, with Hayek, with Ludwig von Mises, who really pioneered the theory of the business cycle that Hayek then elaborated in the 1930s. Mises dies in 1973. Hayek wins the prize in 1974. He wins it for work he did in the 1930s, which is why some people wonder, well, wait a minute. Maybe it was that, because I've heard Rothbard and a few other people say this. Mises was so uncompromising. He just believed in the economics of freedom, and he made value judgments in his own private writing, and he believed in the laissez-faire economy, and so he can't possibly give a prize to this Neanderthal. So Mises dies, and then they give it to Hayek for basically the same work. Is one theory that maybe that they waited for because they couldn't possibly award it to Mises. I mean, it is a little odd that Hayek would win it for such old work, but it doesn't matter. That's an entirely separate theory we can talk about over drinks later. We're meeting at the Wild Boar, which I think is just coffee, so you might have to bring your own spiking agent to the event. But anyway, so how does Hayek going to account for this? Well, this is called, the theory that he helps develop is called the Austrian theory of the business cycle. And it basically involves a couple of quick concepts that are not difficult to get, and then we can just understand this theory very quickly, and then see why, understanding this, if we have this knowledge, it can help us to pursue policies that, again, not only won't shoot us in the foot, but will guarantee that will lead to prosperity in the future, lead to smooth, consistent economic growth instead of boom and bust. Basically, the two concepts we're going to introduce are, number one, the idea of structure of production. This is not complicated at all. It just means that consumer goods do not fall out of the sky. Twinkies do not fall out of the sky. Although I actually want to, let's pretend I didn't give that example, because I don't want to know how they make Twinkies, to be honest with you. I really don't want to know. It's just all the chemical agents involved. I mean, there's nothing about the old things that Mom used to bake for you related to Twinkies, a whole different matter. So let's think about a bagel, because you can make a bagel instantly enough. The bagel does not just appear out of nowhere in a bagel shop. It begins ultimately with a farmer and his harvest. And so we refer to this, or let's say just any old metal thing that I might have, my watch, let's say. You get You got to mine the old, you got to go into the mines and all the rest of it, raw material extraction. Those aspects of production are what we call higher order stages of production because they're so far away from an actual watch or a bagel. I mean, a farmer engaged in this harvest, you're not going to hang around saying, when's that bagel going to be ready? Because it has to go through various processing and all that, and distribution and whatever else, and then finally it becomes a bagel. Or, the clothes you're wearing, it has to start off as cotton, and again, you have to engage in all kinds of processing of cotton, make it, get the seeds out of it, whatever. So the point is that the production process proceeds through a series of stages, from higher order to the lowest order, which would be the finished consumer good itself, the watch, the bagel, the hat, the toothbrush, whatever. So goods go through these stages, that's all. That's all. That's the stage of production, I think. I think that is a realistic way of understanding how production works. Okay, secondly, is this idea. When interest rates are low, this is when businesses tend to be more likely to engage in long-term projects. Why is that? Because the longer term your project is, the more pain those interest payments are going to be in your neck. Anybody with a 30-year mortgage understands this principle. The first month you make that payment, and then you get the second month's stub in the mail, and you get to see how much principal you paid last month and how much interest. You say, what the heck? You're ready to commit an atrocity. You can't believe how much interest you paid. Well, when the loan is stretched out over 30 years, those interest payments are going to be really painful. Whereas if you had a mortgage for, instead of 30 years, 30 days, you would hardly even notice the interest payments. So in other words, the longer term the thing is, the more the interest payments are going to weigh on you. So that is to say, if you have a long-term project and interest rates suddenly become lower, well, wait a minute, that's going to have a big effect on these long-term projects. So projects that might have seemed unprofitable in the past, if you get it financed at a low interest rate, you might say, no, wait a minute, maybe that will in fact turn out okay. Maybe I will pursue that project. So that's what businesses do. And interest rates, how do they become low in the first place? They become low on a free market because the general public saves more. When we save more, the banks have more stuff to lend. They have more money to lend. And so to put it very crudely, the price of borrowing goes down. The banks are just lousy with money. They want to just throw it out the window to potential borrowers. They're just dying to get rid of it. They'll offer lower interest rates. They've got more of it, just supply and demand. So that's it. Those are those basic concepts. Once we got that, now we just go through two scenarios. A healthy scenario and a sick scenario. The healthy scenario is this. All right, the general public saves, interest rates are lower, longer-term projects are engaged in, more research and development, whatever, all these things, more mining capacity, buying more capital, whatever. All these higher-order stages are expanded disproportionately. Those are disproportionately stimulated. Okay, so this is great for two reasons. Number one, because we see how beautifully coordinated it is in these two ways. The first is that if you and I save more, that is basically a way in which we are implicitly saying, I am not going to blow every cent in my paycheck this moment. I'm going to save some of it. I'm going to defer some of my purchases for the future. I'm not going to blow all my money now. I'm going to purchase some things in the future. Well, that's great, because what are businesses engaged in now, disproportionately? Long-term production for the future. All right, so I'm saving for the future, and they're going to have something for me to spend it on in the future. But secondly, think of this. If you and I save more, we're not buying as many hats or watches or eyeglasses or whatever, then those industries are going to start to shrink a little bit. I mean, if they don't have to produce as many things, well, then they have as many raw materials, trucking, whatever, for use at the higher order stages. So that this makes possible the physical wherewithal to see all these new production projects through to completion. So we've got a contraction down here that makes possible the expansion up here. Again, this is all being coordinated through interest rates that are allowed to be free and fluctuate and tell entrepreneurs the truth. But now let's imagine the sick scenario.